Tunisia, April 24th, 1943, 0800 hours, and Lieutenant Peter Gudgeon of the 48th Royal Tank Regiment stands beside the smouldering wreck of his Churchill tank, staring at the clean circular hole punched through its frontal armour, a hole large enough to fit his fist through, made by a weapon his crews have learned to fear with an almost superstitious dread, the 88mm gun of a Tiger tank. Just yesterday, Gudgeon watched his fellow troop leader's Churchill explode in a fireball before his own tank was hit, the shell passing through the frontal plate, through the fighting compartment, and into the engine with such devastating force that he and his crew barely escaped with their lives. But now, as British infantry secure the hills around Geriat el Atash, known to the troops as Point 174, Gudgeon will discover something that will change the course of armoured warfare intelligence for the Allies. Abandoned on the hillside, almost intact, sits the most feared weapon in the German arsenal, a Tiger I heavy tank. The first complete Tiger to fall into Allied hands, and what British engineers will discover when they finally open that massive turret and examine its interior will fundamentally alter Allied understanding of German tank design, revealing secrets that would save countless lives in the battles to come. The Tiger tank's reputation precedes it by months before its appearance in North Africa, whispered about in grim conversations among British tank crews who'd heard rumours from the Eastern Front, stories of an invincible German beast that could destroy Soviet T-34s from ranges where return fire was useless, of armour so thick that no Allied anti-tank weapon could penetrate it frontally, of an 88mm gun derived from the legendary Flak 88 that had already earned its reputation destroying British Matildas in the Western Desert. When the first Tigers arrive in Tunisia in December 1942, operating with Heavy Tank Battalion 501, they are deployed with careful consideration, their crews warned that capture of the new weapon must be prevented at all costs, that if a Tiger cannot be recovered, it must be completely destroyed, every technical specification kept from enemy hands. The German High Command understands that the Tiger represents a technological edge that could evaporate if the Allies gain access to an intact example. Captain Hans Wendorf, commanding Tiger 131, understands these orders perfectly as he manoeuvres his 56-ton behemoth into position on the morning of April 21st, 1943. His tank is part of 2nd Company, Heavy Tank Battalion 504, recently arrived from Germany with the newest production Tigers, machines incorporating lessons learned from earlier models, fighting in the frozen hell of the Eastern Front. Wendorf's crew consists of 5 men, highly trained specialists who've drilled for months on this complex machine, learning to operate the sophisticated Maybach engine that generates 700 horsepower, mastering the intricate gearbox that requires almost superhuman strength to shift, understanding the delicate balance of a turret that weighs over 10 tons and requires hydraulic traverse to turn. These men are not the enthusiastic volunteers of 1939, eager for glory and conquest, but professionals who understand that Germany is now fighting for survival, that every tank, every shell, every gallon of fuel is precious and irreplaceable. The British 48th Royal Tank Regiment, arriving to attack German positions at Mejez al-Bab, brings an entirely different experience to this battle. Having trained in Britain throughout 1942, they've only recently arrived in Tunisia, their Churchill tanks painted in the yellow-brown camouflage scheme meant for desert warfare, their crews drilling on tactics developed for fighting the Afrika Korps. But nothing in their training prepares them for what they're about to face. As they advance toward German positions in the hills, Lieutenant Peter Gudgeon, commanding one of 2 leading troops, notices the eerie silence, the absence of enemy fire that should greet any advancing force. The British infantry accompanying the Churchills move cautiously, expecting resistance at any moment, but the hillsides seem abandoned, as if the Germans have withdrawn during the night. This illusion of safety evaporates in an instant, when Gudgeon's fellow troop leader's tank simply explodes, the Churchill's turret lifting off its ring and tumbling sideways as ammunition ignites, killing the entire crew before they can even understand what hit them. Gudgeon frantically scans for the source of fire, his gunner traversing their turret desperately, searching for a target, any target, that might explain the devastating shot that just killed 5 men. He never finds it before his own Churchill shudders from a tremendous impact that sounds like a giant hammer striking an anvil. The 88mm shell passes completely through the Churchill's frontal armour, something British tankers had been told was impossible, punching through the fighting compartment with such velocity that it creates a shockwave inside the tank, disorienting the crew before it slams into the engine compartment and ignites the fuel system. Gudgeon orders his crew to bail out, and they tumble from the burning Churchill under intense machine gun fire, that kicks up dirt around their feet as they sprint for cover, leaving their tank to burn. Thick black smoke marking another British loss on the Tunisian battlefield. The next day, April 22nd, British forces finally secure the hills after brutal fighting that costs dozens of casualties among both tanks and infantry. As Gudgeon walks back to examine his destroyed Churchill, still smouldering in the morning heat, he follows the line of sight from the impact point backward, calculating angles and distances the way tankers learn to do, trying to understand from where that devastating shot originated. His calculation leads his eyes upward to point 174, and there, sitting motionless in a hull-down position overlooking the entire valley, sits a Tiger tank. But something is wrong. The tank's hatches are open, its gun barrel elevated at an odd angle, and no crew members are visible. As British infantry cautiously approach the massive vehicle, weapons ready for any sign of a trap, they discover what seems impossible. The Tiger has been abandoned, left behind by its crew with only superficial damage visible on its exterior, an enormous prize sitting there as if gift-wrapped for British intelligence officers who've been desperate to examine one of these machines since their first appearance. Major Douglas Lidderdale, the British intelligence officer who'd been tasked with gathering information about the Tiger, arrives at point 174 within hours of securing the position. Unable to believe the reports that a complete Tiger has been captured, standing beside the massive tank, Lidderdale circles it slowly, documenting every detail with his camera, noting the way its armour slopes at carefully calculated angles, observing the overlapping road wheels that give it such distinctive appearance, measuring the thickness of the armour plates that seem impossibly heavy. The Tiger's frontal hull armour measures 100mm thick, sloped at 10 degrees, providing protection equivalent to over 120mm against direct hits, while the turret front armour reaches 120mm, making it virtually impervious to any Allied tank gun firing at normal combat ranges. The side armour, 80mm thick, would stop any British 2-pounder or 6-pounder round except at point-blank range, and even then, only if the shot struck perfectly perpendicular to the armour's surface. But what truly interests Lidderdale are the hits visible on the Tiger's exterior, clear evidence that British gunners managed to damage this supposedly invincible machine. 3 separate impacts are visible on the turret, and as Lidderdale examines them closely, he begins to understand what happened to Tiger 131. The most significant strike shows where a British 6-pounder round travelling at over 2,600 feet per second scraped along the underside of the Tiger's 88mm gun barrel, deflected upward into the gun mantlet, then ricocheted again to lodge itself firmly in the turret ring, the narrow gap where the turret sits on the hull ring bearing. This single shot, fired by a Churchill gunner who was almost certainly moving at the time, who couldn't have known precisely where to aim for maximum effect, achieved what thousands of tank crews would later be trained to attempt deliberately. The 6-pounder round jammed the Tiger's turret traverse mechanism completely, splitting the weld on the turret top plate, shattering the radio equipment inside, and likely sending fragments of spalling, jagged pieces of armour torn loose by the impact's shock, flying around the crew compartment at lethal velocities. The second British round hit the right-hand turret lifting stud, one of the hardened steel points used to attach cables when removing the turret for maintenance, the impact creating a deep crater in the steel, but not penetrating into the crew compartment. The third hit proves most intriguing to Lidderdale, as he pieces together the sequence of events. This 6-pounder round struck the loader's hatch while it was in the open position, completely smashing the heavy steel hatch and deflecting the shell to impact the hatch rim, likely sending more fragments into the turret interior where the loader would have been standing. The combined effect of these 3 hits on Tiger 131's crew must have been catastrophic from a psychological perspective, even if the armour prevented complete penetration. The turret suddenly immobilised, unable to traverse to engage new targets, the radio destroyed, eliminating communication with other tanks or headquarters, fragments of steel ricocheting inside the cramped crew compartment, the loader possibly wounded or killed by the third hit, all while under continued fire from British tanks whose gunners had proven they could hit a Tiger's weak points with disturbing accuracy. British Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers arrive at point 174 on April 25th, tasked with the delicate job of examining Tiger 131 without triggering any potential booby traps or demolition charges the German crew might have set before abandoning the tank. Lieutenant James Thompson, a mechanical engineer in civilian life who now wears Royal Army uniform, approaches the open commander's cupola with extreme caution, checking for tripwires or chemical igniters that would destroy the tank if disturbed. Finding none, he carefully lowers himself through the cupola into the commander's position, his torch illuminating the Tiger's interior for the first time by Allied eyes. What Thompson sees in that moment, what he discovers as he examines every detail of the Tiger's fighting compartment, will be documented in reports that reach the highest levels of Allied command within days, information that will influence tank design and tactical doctrine for the remainder of the war. The first thing that strikes Thompson as his eyes adjust to the dimness inside Tiger 131 is the sheer complexity of the machine. The way every surface is covered with controls, instruments, valves, levers and switches that seem to require an engineering degree to understand. The Tiger's interior is not the crude Spartan fighting compartment of early war tanks, but rather a sophisticated control centre that reflects German engineering philosophy, the belief that mechanical perfection and technical superiority could overcome any numerical disadvantage. Thompson's torch beam reveals a gunner's position, equipped with a Termsiel Fernrohr 9B binocular sight, a precision optical instrument that allows target acquisition at ranges exceeding 2,000 metres, far beyond anything mounted in British tanks. The sight's reticle includes sophisticated range-finding marks and ballistic compensation for the 88mm gun's various ammunition types, allowing accurate first-shot hits against targets that British gunners would need multiple ranging shots to engage successfully. The loader's position, where the third British shell struck, shows evidence of the damage Thompson expected. Bloodstains mark the turret interior near the loader's station, dark brown spots that tell a grim story of what happened to the man standing there when the 6-pounder round smashed through the open hatch. Shell fragments have embedded themselves in the turret's internal padding, puncture marks indicating the violence of the impact's shockwave inside the confined space. The loader's job in a Tiger involves handling ammunition weighing up to 23 kilograms for the 88mm gun's armour-piercing rounds, selecting from different ammunition types stored in bins around the turret and hull, maintaining a firing rate that could reach 6 to 8 rounds per minute if the loader is skilled and the tactical situation allows for careful aimed fire. Tiger 131's ammunition storage reveals another secret that British intelligence finds fascinating. The tank carries a mix of armour-piercing rounds, high-explosive shells, and a new type of ammunition that Thompson's colleagues will later identify as Panzergranate 39, an armour-piercing capped ballistic cap round, capable of penetrating 120mm of armour at 1,000 metres range, making it effective against any Allied tank at combat distances. Moving forward into the hull, Thompson discovers the driver's position, a cramped station that requires the operator to steer the 56-ton vehicle using a pair of steering levers that control brake bands on the transmission, a system that demands enormous physical strength during extended operations, leaving Tiger drivers exhausted after long marches. The Maybach HL230 P45 engine generates sufficient power, but the Tiger's transmission, a Maybach Olvar OG 4012-16 with 8 forward and 4 reverse gears, represents a constant source of mechanical problems for German tank crews, gear changes requiring such force that drivers sometimes break their wrists attempting shifts during combat. The gearbox sits directly behind the driver and radio operator, and Thompson notes numerous oil leaks around the transmission seals, evidence of the mechanical stress that Tiger transmissions endure under the vehicle's enormous weight. This weakness in the Tiger's drivetrain will become valuable intelligence as Allied forces develop tactics to exploit German armour's mechanical vulnerability. But the most shocking discovery comes when British engineers finally remove Tiger 131's turret using a specially constructed crane, lifting the 10-ton mass off its turret ring to examine the internal mechanisms, and more importantly, to access the hull's interior without the turret obstructing their view. What they find, underneath that massive turret, in the hull's fighting compartment and engine bay, reveals the Tiger's greatest weakness, the Achilles heel that German engineers could never fully overcome. The turret floor sits atop the hull on the turret ring bearing, a massive circular race that allows the turret to traverse 360 degrees, and removing the turret exposes this ring bearing for examination. Thompson and his colleagues discover that the bearing, while robust enough under normal circumstances, represents a critical vulnerability if struck by enemy fire, exactly what happened to Tiger 131 when that British 6-pounder round lodged in the ring mechanism. The bearing's complexity means that field repairs are nearly impossible if it becomes damaged, effectively immobilizing the turret and rendering the tank's main gun useless for engaging any target not directly in front of the vehicle. Examining the hull interior with the turret removed reveals another secret that British intelligence finds invaluable. The Tiger's ammunition storage bins, fuel tanks, and critical mechanical components are arranged in ways that create specific vulnerability patterns, weak points that Allied gunners can be trained to target deliberately. The ammunition bins in the hull sponsor areas, on either side of the fighting compartment, are protected only by the hull's side armour, making them vulnerable to flanking shots that Allied tactics will be redesigned to exploit. The fuel tanks, situated in the hull's rear corners, become priority targets once their location is documented, as penetrating shots into these areas risk catastrophic fires that Tiger crews cannot escape from the tank's cramped interior. The engine compartment, accessible through the turret opening now that the turret is removed, shows the Maybach engine's sophisticated design, but also its maintenance intensity, requiring constant attention to cooling systems, fuel injection, electrical ignition, and lubrication that German supply lines increasingly cannot provide as the war progresses. British metallurgists examine samples of Tiger 131's armour, cutting small sections from areas already damaged by the 6-pounder hits, subjecting the steel to microscopic analysis, hardness testing, and ballistic trials that reveal the armour's composition and heat treatment. The results surprise Allied experts, who'd assumed German armour represented the pinnacle of metallurgical science. The Tiger's armour plate consists of chromium molybdenum steel, heat-treated to a hardness of approximately 260 Brunel, providing excellent ballistic protection, but also making it brittle under certain impact conditions, prone to catastrophic cracking if struck by large-caliber rounds at high velocity, or if subjected to repeated impacts in the same area. This brittleness becomes more pronounced at cold temperatures, a discovery that helps explain reports from the Eastern Front about Tiger armour shattering when hit by Soviet heavy-caliber guns in winter conditions. The armour's face-hardened outer surface resists penetration effectively, but if this hardened layer is breached, the softer backing steel behind it cannot prevent shells from passing through, creating the clean penetrations that Allied gunners will learn to recognise as proof of effective hits. The 88mm KWK 36 L56 gun, removed from Tiger 131's turret for detailed examination, proves to be exactly what British intelligence suspected: a tank-mounted version of the famous Flak 88 anti-aircraft gun that had terrorised British armour in North Africa when used in the anti-tank role. The gun's 56 caliber barrel length provides the velocity necessary for armour-piercing rounds to penetrate any Allied tank at normal combat ranges, while the gun's sophisticated recoil mechanism and precise manufacturing tolerances allow for accuracy that British 75mm and 6-pounder guns cannot match beyond 1,000 metres. But examining the gun also reveals vulnerabilities. The external mantlet, while heavily armoured, creates a shot trap where shells striking at certain angles can be deflected downward into the thin roof armour above the driver's position, potentially penetrating into the hull. This shot trap characteristic becomes part of Allied gunnery training, crews taught to aim for the mantlet's lower edge when engaging Tigers frontally, attempting to exploit this design flaw. Tiger 131's optical equipment, when examined by British experts, reveals yet another area where German technology leads Allied developments. The gunner's binocular sight provides magnification and optical clarity far superior to anything installed in Churchill or Sherman tanks, giving Tiger gunners a decisive advantage in target acquisition and engagement at extended ranges. The commander's cupola includes 7 episcopes, providing 360-degree vision without exposing the commander above the turret, a safety feature that British tanks lack, forcing commanders to observe from open hatches where they're vulnerable to small arms fire and shell fragments. The German optical glass, manufactured by Zeiss to exacting standards, represents precision manufacturing that Allied industry struggles to replicate, though British engineers carefully document the specifications for future development programs. The psychological impact of examining Tiger 131 extends beyond the technical intelligence gathered from its mechanisms and armour. British tank crews who'd faced Tigers in combat, who'd watched their shells bounce harmlessly off Tiger armour, while German 88mm rounds tore through Churchill and Sherman armour like paper, finally understand that the Tiger is not invincible, that it can be stopped by accurate gunnery and proper tactics. Lieutenant Peter Gudgeon, invited to examine the Tiger that destroyed his Churchill, stands inside Tiger 131's turret and imagines the German crew's panic when British 6-pounder rounds started finding weak points in their supposedly impregnable fortress, the terror of being trapped inside a disabled tank, while enemy fire continues to impact against the armour, the decision to abandon the vehicle rather than face certain death inside its steel hull. Gudgeon realises that the Tiger's crew, despite their superior equipment, were just as frightened and vulnerable as British tankers, that German training and discipline could break under combat stress, just as British crews sometimes panicked under Tiger fire. Major Douglas Lidderdale's comprehensive report on Tiger 131, completed in May 1943 and distributed throughout Allied armoured forces, becomes required reading for every tank commander preparing to face German armour. The report includes detailed diagrams showing the Tiger's internal layout, identifies weak points in the armour scheme where concentrated fire might achieve penetration, describes the tank's limited mechanical reliability and its crew's physical exhaustion from operating the complex vehicle, and perhaps most importantly, destroys the myth of Tiger invincibility that had demoralised Allied tank crews since the weapon's first appearance. Lidderdale's concluding paragraph states, simply but powerfully, that the Tiger represents formidable opposition, but can be defeated by well-trained crews using proper tactics, that its strengths in armour protection and firepower are balanced by weaknesses in mobility, mechanical reliability, and combat endurance that Allied forces can exploit. The tactical doctrine developed from Tiger 131's examination emphasises flanking attacks, multiple tanks engaging a single Tiger from different angles to divide its defensive fire, targeting the turret ring and gun mantlet to disable the Tiger's main weapon, and exploiting the Tiger's slow turret traverse and limited mobility to force the German crew into positions where Allied numerical superiority can overwhelm them. These tactics, tested and refined throughout 1943 and 1944, prove effective in reducing Tiger casualties among Allied forces, though facing these machines never becomes routine or safe for tankers, who know that one mistake, one lucky German shot, can still mean instant death. Tiger 131's journey from battlefield capture to museum display spans decades. The tank initially transported to Britain for extensive testing at military proving grounds, fired upon by various Allied weapons to determine penetration capabilities, its engine and transmission run until failure to understand maintenance requirements and operational endurance. After the war, Tiger 131 is placed in storage at the School of Tank Technology in Chobham, spending years essentially forgotten as newer Cold War tanks make German World War II armour seem obsolete. In 1951, the tank is moved to the Tank Museum at Bovington, Dorset, joining the collection of armoured fighting vehicles from conflicts spanning a century. There, Tiger 131 sits for decades, gradually deteriorating from exposure and neglect, its engine seized, its systems inoperative, a static display piece that visitors can walk around but cannot truly experience. The decision to restore Tiger 131 to running condition comes in 1990, when museum staff realises that the only complete operational Tiger in existence is slowly rusting into permanent immobility. A meticulous restoration begins, engineers and mechanics carefully disassembling every system, rebuilding the Maybach engine, restoring the transmissions function, repairing the electrical systems, and ensuring that all controls operate as they did when Hans Vendorf commanded this machine in Tunisia. The restoration takes years, requiring fabrication of replacement parts from original blueprints, sourcing correct materials that match 1943 specifications, and solving problems that would have been routine for German mechanics, but challenge modern engineers unfamiliar with Tiger technology. In 2003, Tiger 131 runs under its own power for the first time since 1943. Its Maybach engine roaring to life, black exhaust smoke billowing from the deck as the transmission engages, and the massive tank moves forward, demonstrating for a new generation exactly what Allied tankers faced when they encountered these machines in combat. Today, Tiger 131 participates in demonstration days at the Tank Museum, carefully driven around a circuit by trained operators who understand the Tiger's quirks and limitations, giving audiences a visceral sense of the power and menace these tanks projected on the battlefield. The ground trembles as 56 tons of German armour passes by, the distinctive exhaust note of the Maybach engine echoing across the museum grounds, the Tiger's wide tracks leaving deep impressions in the soil, as they did across North Africa, Italy, France and Russia 7 decades earlier. Visitors can examine the damage from those British 6-pounder rounds, still visible on the turret exterior, physical evidence of the battle that ended Tiger 131's combat career and began its second life as an intelligence prize and historical artifact. The story of Tiger 131 represents more than just the capture of an enemy tank or the technical intelligence gained from examining its systems. It stands as testament to the courage of British tankers like Lieutenant Peter Gudgeon, who faced these fearsome machines in tanks they knew were outgunned and out-armoured. Men who did their duty despite understanding that they'd likely die if they encountered a Tiger in combat. It demonstrates the importance of accurate, skilled gunnery, the way 3 precisely aimed shots from Churchill's 6-pounder guns disabled a supposedly invincible Tiger by hitting vulnerable points that the German crew probably never considered weak. And it illustrates how a single captured example of enemy equipment can influence an entire war's tactical and operational development. the intelligence gathered from Tiger 131 directly contributing to Allied victory in Europe by removing the psychological advantage German heavy tanks had enjoyed. What British engineers found when they lifted that massive turret off Tiger 131's hull in Tunisia shocked them, not because of any single revolutionary discovery, but because the accumulation of details, the documentation of weak points and design compromises, and the understanding of German engineering priorities revealed that the Tiger could be beaten, that German armoured superiority was not permanent or insurmountable. The Tiger's complexity, its mechanical fragility, its crew's exhaustion from operating such a demanding machine, these human and engineering limitations balanced the advantages of thick armour and a powerful gun. Tiger 131 taught Allied forces that no weapon system is invincible, that every design involves compromises and trade-offs, and that understanding your enemy's capabilities in detail is the first step toward defeating them. These lessons, learned from one abandoned tank on a Tunisian hillside, helped win World War II's armoured battles and continue influencing military thinking into the present day.